Welcome back, everybody. We're just so glad to have you with us and glad to be continuing on with day one of our conference. And now I'm really delighted to introduce a very special guest speaker to our network. Karen B.K. Chan is here to talk to us about emotional intelligence and positive parenting. And Karen, it's great to have you here, and I'll pass things over to you and just welcome. And
Thank
we're
you.
really glad to have you here.
Thank you, Sydney. I really appreciate you inviting me. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you. So my name is Karen B.K. Chan. I use the pronouns she or they. Take your pick. You can also call me Karen or BK. Take your pick. And I am an emotional literacy educator. And I've been doing this work for about 21, 22 years. Before doing emotional literacy work, I was a full-time sex educator. And I also, using the emotional literacy lens, do a lot of work in anti-oppression, anti-racism, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So today I'm really excited to talk to you about positive parenting. And I'm hearing that the conference is going super well. And I want to congratulate you on that, as well as say how I'm excited to be part of it. So I'm sharing with you my slides, which will be available to you afterwards, as well the recording. It's easy emotional intelligence tools for positive parenting. And I'm sharing with you some of these tools with two hats on, right? Both as an educator and as a parent. And I'm sure many of you have multiple hats on as well. And so I invite you to actually connect to the material under all of your hats. You don't only have to be your role, you can also be all the many other roles and responsibilities that you have with you in life. Before I go into the tools, I wanted to tell you a little bit about me. I make it a point to share a little bit of myself because it's important that you know where I come from and who I come from and how I'm shaped as we're all shaped by our influences. So these are my cousins. There are six of my cousins, and this is in Hong Kong where I grew up. And there I am. We're sitting according to age. And I was a bit smaller than the two boys who are my cousins here, even though I'm older than one of them. I just find this picture really cute because we all are such children, and everyone is grown now, but and nobody is this cute anymore. So it's nice to share that with you. I want to share also a little bit about the fact that I emigrated. I emigrated from Hong Kong to Toronto when I was 11. And I've been in Canada since, living in different cities within the country. And so many of the perspectives I take have to do with occupying multiple roles of outsider, insider, of somebody who's doing a lot of observing in trying to figure out how to belong or fit in. And also, here's another photo of my son. This is Oscar when he was about, I think, 20 months, I'd say. And he's not much older than that now, but situating myself in this work, very biased because now I know how hard it is to be a parent. I have much fewer pieces of advice for parents. So let's start with a framework. Many of us went to school for all kinds of things. I'd love to know if you're interested in telling me in the chat, where did you go to school for emotions? What schools of emotions have you been exposed to? sometimes it's an official one, and other times it's a lot of school of hard knocks, kind of school of life. Where would you say you learned the most about emotions from? Um, Thank you, Lee. Don't share emotions. That is an unofficial yet very powerful lesson. Thank you. What are other sources of teachings and schooling that you've received? We've got live lessons. Thank you, Brenda. Parents, life, life experiences, lived experiences, family, as well as church. Absolutely. These things all sometimes explicitly and sometimes implicitly tell us about emotions, tell us how to be with our emotions, and often, of course, through demonstration from parents, from loved ones, from friends, from schools, from our communities, how you're supposed to behave regarding emotions. Thank you. Mom, share your emotions, and dad, don't share your emotions. Wonderful dichotomy right there. Thanks. And life, family, friends, relationships, life and lived experiences through education, early childhood education, absolutely, child and family studies, and counseling psychology. Thanks, Nicole. And thanks, Kelly, also community. Sarah shares Flip University. I have a course through Flip, my collaborators, on emotional intelligence. And thanks, Sarah, for the thumbs up. So emotions, this is a framework that I use, which is quite different from the framework I learned through my life, through my lived experiences, through the role models I had. This is now currently the model that I use in my work. One is that it's a literacy, that it's something we can learn. And I often will say, I teach emotional literacy, I teach emotional intelligence, not because I'm talented in emotions. In fact, I find myself to be a hardworking student, but somebody who needs a lot of study. You know, if I was naturally talented, I wouldn't need to study it. I'd just be a genius. But I do always think, just like, you know, if I were to study violin, I want to study with a teacher who's not just a natural genius. I actually would prefer a teacher who knows what it's like to struggle, because I would likely struggle. So it's a literacy. This is good news for me and people like me who comes to emotions perhaps late, perhaps feeling quite stumbly about it. Emotions, another important piece of the framework I use, is that it's not irrational. So often it's framed as either or. Either you're going to be emotional or you're going to be rational. You're going to be smart about it and use facts, or you're going to be all swampy with your emotions. But in fact, the framework I use believes that emotions are messages. They happen in your body as biochemicals, and they're happening because you need to know something about your body, about your life, about your surroundings. So without emotions, and research studies have shown that people, you know, who've had brain injuries where the emotion centers have been damaged, they have a lot of trouble in life. And the trouble comes especially in decision making, the smallest decisions. Should I fill my cup all the way or just halfway? Should I have this for lunch or that? All of those are connected to our emotions. So our emotions are there to tell us something. And in the course that Sarah is talking about, we talk about emotions as if it's news. So this news might be a piece of mail that's coming to you into your mailbox, like old-fashioned kind of mailbox, and it's there in a little envelope. And it's our choice not to open it or to not open it. And you may know this from experience, if you have a lot of mail that you don't open, eventually you get into trouble. Either your water gets shut off or a really important piece of news you'll miss. And that's the same with emotions, because they're there to tell us something it's better to know or not. And so therefore, emotions are very rational. Something happens, you need to know about it, here's a message. And in fact, it's one of the most rational and logical manifestations of being alive. Another important piece is that emotions are not positive or negative. This is a very common mythology in popular culture. positive emotions, negative emotions. What I think people are actually trying to say is emotions that I like and emotions that I don't like. Emotions that I know what to do with and emotions that I feel ashamed about, that I feel awkward about, I feel embarrassed about. I wish I didn't feel because I hate feeling them. But themselves, the emotions are not imbued with qualities. It's just information. It's just mail. You know, you owe $50, we owe you $50. It's all information. And it's actually important to know. And therefore, if I say that's negative information, I'm more likely to try to ignore it and not open that mail. And so in my frameworks, I don't use positive emotion and negative emotion. I try to say there are things I love feeling, like being proud of myself, like feeling loved, like feeling at peace. Things I don't like feeling, self-conscious, jealous, sad, disappointed. Now, interestingly, it's not universal. Some of us are okay feeling sad, and some of us are terrible at feeling sad. So terrible that some of us will cover our sadness with extra joyful expression. Sometimes folks who are happy all the time are happy all the time. And other times, those folks are just doing it because they feel a responsibility to be joyful people. My guess is for somebody who does that out of responsibility, they have in their school of life, in their school of community, have been taught a lot about the burden that you pose to others when you are sad. It's complex and contradictory, our emotional landscape. I mean, we know this because we live it. And yet, sometimes we talk as if it shouldn't be that way. If you've ever been the person who says, I know I shouldn't feel jealous, you know, just because somebody got a vaccine early, it's because they're taking care of their mother who's in a long-term care facility. I know I shouldn't feel jealous. But the moment you've said, I know I shouldn't, it actually is a sign that you already do. You already feel jealous. So why are you having that relationship to your feeling of jealousy? That's the question. Not why are you jealous, but why are you resenting being jealous? What happens if you say, I'm jealous? I guess I'm that person who gets jealous about good things that happen to other people. So all of this has to do with acceptance, and all of this has to do with yes, and I am a good person and I get jealous. I am a good parent and I'm sick of you. I am a great worker and a service provider and I'm tired and I would like to retire right now. All of that is true. And then finally, it's influential and absolutely essential if your job involves any kind of influence. If you need to influence somebody else in order to be effective in your job, then you need rapport in order to have that influence. Of course, you can have other kinds of influence. If you break the law, then a law enforcement has the influence of arresting you, right? And that is huge influence. And they don't need rapport for that. You don't even have to like them before they have that influence on your life. But most of us in social service industries, our influence has to come through rapport. And if we are to build rapport with somebody else, we need emotions to be something we know how to manage. So it's essential. At any point, if you have comments or questions, I welcome them in the chat. So I know that this is a word that you use a lot in your work, zones. It means very different things in my work. So here's another kind of zones for you. This is built off of the model of the learning zone model, which a lot of educators use to figure out how do we prime people for learning? How do we have my learner or my student get the most out of their experience? So according to this model, it says all of life's experience happens in one of three zones. Anything that happens to you, it happens in one of these three zones. The comfort zone in the center, that's where things are predictable. That's where things are, going to turn out the way you expect. It could be that you've got your feet up, you're watching your favorite show, you're petting your cat. That's a comfort zone for many of us. If running 17 kilometers every morning is your routine, then that might be your comfort zone. Now, your comfort zone shrinks and grows depending on your needs, your basic needs, right? When you're hungry, comfort zone gets smaller. 11 months into a pandemic, working from home, figuring out how to adapt all of your practices into this new world, it really shrinks all of our comfort zones. Outside of the comfort zone is the stretch and panic zones. According to this model, both of these zones are uncomfortable, but there are different kinds of discomfort. Stretch zone is a kind of discomfort where you can manage and you can still stay engaged. That means you use your full brain. And in the stretch zone is where learning happens. So if I were using this model to think about when my children are going to learn best, when my adult students are going to learn best, I'm going to think, how do I get them into the stretch zone? Stretch zone is where we change our minds, we ask great questions, we listen. That is an important one because we're not listening in panic zone. We're expressing ourselves and telling the truth about what we think. We're vulnerable in a good way in the stretch zone. And outside of the stretch zone is the panic zone. That's where overwhelm happens. The key word in panic is overwhelm and threat. We feel threatened. Now, the threat might be our physical safety, right? So I would go into my panic zone if I left my house and I start to see, a car speeding towards me. Immediate panic zone. My brain has to go there so I can survive. It's threatening my existence, literally. Another kind of panic zone would be I'm about to do a talk online and the technical stuff doesn't work out. That might send me into a panic zone. What's threatened in that moment? My reputation, my sense of responsibility to deliver a talk to you, worrying, making sure that your conference goes okay, making sure I'm trustworthy. I want to be seen as competent. All those things are threatened by technical difficulties. Possibly. I might not go into my panic zone. Sydney just now did some last minute changes for our session today and managed to do it fully in the stretch with a short time and a lot of things to change. So panic zone is where our brain says this is too much. Let's use a smaller part of it and make sure we survive. Sometimes what we perceive to be threatening is not actually threatening. It's not actually threatening. It just is something that sends us into a panic. Now, the next part of this is talking about how in the panic zone, basically is where we do fight or flight. We either fight something or flee it. That is what survival is about. And in the compass of reactions, which is the model that I'm superimposing onto this zones model, we say, actually, you can get even more specific about fight and flight. You can talk about fight in two main ways, attacking others and attacking self. And you can talk about fleeing in two main ways, which are on the bottom of the screen, withdrawing and avoiding. Let's talk about each one of them in more detail. Attacking others, upper right-hand corner. Attacking others is when I feel threatened, and what my brain decides to do to survive this moment is to assign the blame to somebody else. Everything that's wrong with this moment is somebody else's problem. So what it might look like is indignation. I'm right, you're wrong. Other people are wrong. I'm good, you are bad. It might also be aggression and hostility. Any kind of physical aggression would also fall into this category. Blaming and shaming. So this is an externalizing of that discomfort. If you move over to upper left in attack self, then you've got chronic guilt. That's when you take all that, externalizing that we might do and attack others, we just turn it on ourselves. It turns into something like chronic guilt. You think everything is your responsibility when things don't go right. You take things on. You maybe put down yourself. And one of the major manifestations is imagining that other people are judging you or putting you down or are slighting you or that they don't value you. It is a painful place to be in, attack self. because it really feels very real in that moment. And sometimes if it's chronic, it can feel very real all the time. If you move to the bottom under flight, let's talk a bit about withdraw on the bottom left. That includes what we call fainting. Fainting is not, it could be literally fainting. You know, when the body goes into shock, we literally will faint. That is certainly a panic zone as well. But fainting, shutting down are part of the brain saying, no, 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 I can't deal, and I'm going to dissociate. All those things are related. If you're the kind of person who, when you're in a conflict with somebody else, you go into silent treatment. You give them the silent treatment. You cut off relationships or conversations abruptly. That's a kind of withdrawing panic. And finally, in avoid, that's when we either distract or numb ourselves in order to survive. So people pleasing, sometimes called appeasing, is under avoid. Procrastinating is under avoid because the moment I have to pick up a task, it's overwhelming, the stress or the dread of that task. I'm going to put it aside and replace it with a different feeling that feels a little bit better. Maybe I'm just going to read, a magazine subscription that I've had for years and I've just not read the magazines. And sometimes, for some reason, in this moment, I have to read the whole stack of magazines before I start on this urgent task. Procrastinating is avoidance. Numbing, anything that contributes to numbing, substituting a better feeling, including drugs, alcohol, gambling, shopping, pornography, all those things that can help us feel a little bit better in this moment, Netflix, but puts it off and it doesn't take care of the stressor. Those are all numbing strategies. So everyone panics. It is part of being human. And in fact, it keeps you alive. So it's not a bad thing to panic. It is a good thing you panic. And what's even better is being able to know when you're panicked. Because then you have some choices that you can make to get yourself back to the stretch. If you have a big decision to make, you want your whole brain, you want stretch. If you have a big conversation to have, you want to be in stretch for that conversation. You don't want to do it in the panic. So in this moment, my question to you is, what sends you into panic? And you can think about all the different hats you wear in a work setting, in a life setting, in a personal, interpersonal setting, in terms of the world. What are some things that would send you into panic? If I said right now, let's say if this was an in-person conference and the next activity we do as a group is that I'm bringing in a karaoke machine and then we're all just going to do solos on this karaoke machine, one at a time. That might send some of us into panic. So tell me in the chat, what are some things that might send you into panic that you recognize, either in a work setting or in a personal life setting? Financial stress, absolutely. Thank you, Lee. And D Lovelace, you're ready for the karaoke. Awesome. Joan says unexpected event subjects, absolutely, including the karaoke machine. Calling people on the phone. Thank you, Lexa. I had that experience as a young person, because I remember actually emigrating and arriving in Canada and noticing that people like to speak in a sing-song way, like you have to undulate your voice to be interesting. And I found it really nerve-wracking on the phone to do that, because on the phone, you got nothing else but my voice. And so every time I had to talk on the phone, I would sweat so much. And the outcome is I hate being on the phone still, even though I don't have an issue with, undulating my voice or feeling at ease with it, but it's just created a panic zone that has stayed. Family conflict, absolutely. Fear of the unknown. Stephanie gives thumbs up to a karaoke, yay. Callie says family conflict, stress, public speaking, health issues of family members, running late, Absolutely. Being late, the water leaking out of your ceiling, that will send most of us immediately into the panic zone. Competing priorities, death of loved ones, silence from your spouse. Absolutely. So here's a great capture of when somebody else is in their panic zone. That is a very easy thing, that our bodies will respond also with panic. So if a spouse goes into, gives you the silent treatment, they're in withdrawal, and that can churn all kinds of panic inside of you. Poor health of elderly parents, looking at housing market, calling people on the phone is one for Stephanie as well. Having a high workload, feeling overwhelmed, blanking out while facilitating calls in the middle of the night. Yeah. Overbooking, child in distress, fear of the unknown, unexpected company when my house is messy. Family member whose go-to for grief or stress is anger. So beautiful capture also right there, when somebody's in grief or in stress, that they go to anger. That is a kind of attack others, even if they're not attacking you or attacking anyone in specific. It's just a way of reacting to that kind of overwhelming stress or grief. Child in distress, public speaking, anything that carries a sense of being the one responsible, absolutely connected to the feeling of insecurity. Thank you for that insight, Nancy. Uncertainty, having only cash at the checkout store and being over the total and not having enough money. What a beautiful capture of a moment of panic. Making mistakes, threat of COVID, being overtired, family member being ill, judgment or the feeling of being judged. Unknowns, lot of uncertainty, someone who is presenting aggression or anger, being put in the middle of a difficult situation between coworkers or family. Thank you. Past trauma as well. Thanks, Rochelle. Thank you for all of your input. And of course, in this moment in 2021, which follows 2020, during which, racial uprisings, against racial injustice happened. This is also, I'm in the circle a lot talking about equity, diversity, and things like that. This is also adding another layer while we stand with values of wanting diversity, inclusion, and equity. So often there's so much fear when these topics come up. Fear of saying something wrong, fear of doing something wrong, fear of not being enough. That is overwhelming as well. So thank you for sharing some of that context. Now I want to share with you a poll just to get a little bit more concrete about what are some of the reactions you go to for any of these panics. And I want to highlight the fact that you read other people's panic triggers, panic stressors, and I want you to notice that not everything would send you into the panic zone. Maybe many of them you would have in common with the person who said it. But also, not everything sends everyone into the panic zone in the same way. So I'm going to launch a poll right now, and there are 4 questions. It is anonymous and it's multiple choice. So you can click as many as apply to you. And this is just about getting a sense of what you relate to. This is not a diagnostic tool of whether you're a good person or a bad person.
I do apologize. The numbering is a little weird, but I think they're all there, aren't they?
I think they are. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
So go ahead and register your votes when you have a chance. We're at 70%. I'll give you another 5 seconds or so.
Became just acknowledging a comment from
Mhm.
Lee in the chat, just saying that you do have to select something in category or it won't let you submit. So,
Okay,
and
so
then
that's going to throw our answers off a little bit, everyone. Thank you for noticing that, Lee, and also Kelly. So yeah, so click something in everything and let's just know that it will throw us off by a little bit. All right, we're at 90%. So I'm gonna end the poll and you get a sense of where we're at. And more important than what it says in exact numbers is I want you to pay attention to how it felt, to just look at these and see if you relate. And also remember what came up for you, right? As you were answering these. Are some of these right on the nose? Are some of these hard to admit to? Are some of these really clearly not something that you can relate to? And so the first question, the highest votes were, I obsess over everything I've said or done. I try to fix everything, and I'm overly aware of other people's judgment. And, you know, it may be really obvious that all of these statements in question one have to do with attack self, right? They're all connected to attack self. So if you clicked many in this part, then attack self might be a tendency that you have within your life. And we panic all in different ways, in different patterns. How we panic, you know, comes from our upbringing, who we saw panic around us, who was, you know, teaching us explicitly what you're supposed to do when you panic. A lot of rules are gendered, right? Certain ways of panicking are certainly not allowed in certain gender rules. And then sometimes our professional training can also skew how we panic. Let's look at number 2. We've got a lot fewer votes on this one. And the ones that got the most votes include procrastinating, becoming perfectionistic, distracting myself from what's bothering me, or pretending everything is okay. And this group is avoidance. So anything you can check off here are connected to an avoiding pattern of panic. Number 3, the clear quote unquote winner is I find other people extra irritating. Absolutely. So this would be attack others. All of the statements under here are attack others. And like we heard from Kelly, I understand that you may not have related to any of the statements within a group, but you had to click something. Number 4, the highest numbers came from I give the silent treatment or become quiet. I shut down or dissociate. And this group is about withdraw, right? These are ways that our brains will withdraw. So thank you for filling in the poll and also for reflecting what it was like. Joan shares, I got uncomfortable relating to some of the answers. Yeah, right on, same here. So these are some of the ways how you panic. It's good to know, because one of the most important things we need if we are to put a space between a moment of stress and our reaction or response is that we need a space. We need a space between the two. Otherwise, it's stress and then reaction, and it's just jumbled up. And what we're trying to do in creating more wellness, in creating more possibility for positive parenting, in using emotional intelligence, and in getting outcomes that are more desirable, is to actually find some space between the stress and the response. And so how we create that space, how we get to choose the response, has to do with recognizing when we're in panic and moving back to stretch. How do you get back to stretch? You know yourself, some of your ways. So can you tell me, what are some ways that you return to stretch? Yeah, Lee says it sounds a bit like the Bounce Back and Thrive program. And I don't know much about the program, but anything that is about resilience and thriving will be addressing this, maybe in different words, but it is about recognizing panic. It is about returning to stretch so that you can once again re-engage listening, once again re-engage learning, and re-engage your feelings. Lori says sleep. Absolutely. This is one that a lot of times people forget. Talking it out. Thank you, Florence. Deep breaths, fresh air, walking, exercise, breathing away, walk, sleeping, exercising, yoga, breathing, take a walk, humor, breathing, nature, fresh air, physical activity, prayer, music. I'm seeing smudging, quietness, reflection, reading, meditation, taking pause, music, reading, sleeping, fresh air, meditation, music, Sudoku, crochet, singing, sit by myself for a while, yoga, mindfulness, exercise, connecting to the land, sitting, breathing, nature, yoga with Adrian, one of my favorites, online teachers, talk with a close one, somebody close to you, power clean, absolutely, breathing, music, alone time. I'm seeing us echo each other a lot. Cedar bath, martial arts, cleaning, smudging, water. Yeah, right on, Andrea. So returning to stretch, just like you've described, is about reconnecting. Because something that happens in the panic zone is disconnection. Because your brain says, we're going to die. And it might be, we're going to die because I'm late. We're going to die because I've got a child in distress, right? So your brain shuts many things down, and connection is one of them. So everything you've shared is connection to self. So the breathing, the movement, the yoga, all of that has to do with returning to yourself. Because in panic, we hold our breaths, we hold our shoulders. Often we're forward and up. And so finding a way to go back and down is literally reconnecting to your center, your groundedness, connecting to loved ones, so close people, loved ones, trusted friend, trusted colleague, animals, children, all those ways of connecting to another, and then reconnecting to nature, right? So long walks, being in the world, all of those things can help you reconnect. One key that we want to ask ourselves, key question is the thing you're doing a distraction from panic, or is it returning you to stretch? Is it a distraction from stressor, or is it returning you to stretch? Sometimes the distraction is all you need to be stretchy again, but often it can be mistaken. And so if you can relate to the feeling of, I can never relax, I can't relax. Some people really relate to that statement, and other people are saying, what are you talking about? I'm an expert at relaxing. If you relate to the feeling of, I can't relax, then be extra careful, because sometimes when we look for things to return to stretch, to do self-care, we're adding to our responsibilities. We're doing more, but we may not be more in our stretch zone. We might actually add more things to be good at, and more ways to fall short. Another tool in positive parenting, before we move on, I actually want to say it's obvious, I think, how it connects to positive parenting, because for a parent who is stressed, who is facing multiple opportunities to be stressed all the time, Returning to stretch is really important, yet many people continue to deal only in the panic zone. Many of us, especially when the responsibilities pile on, we actually never leave the panic zone, right? If you've ever had those days or weeks where people consistently are irritating, that might be a sign that you're in your panic zone and there's not a way of getting out of it. And think about parents that you might work with. Also, it is actually really important, this little piece of self-awareness. This is panic zone. This is not you. This is you in overwhelm, and returning to stretch can help. How do we return to stretch other than many of the things that you've listed? And Florence have added, sometimes I cry, and I also hear you, D. Lovelace. Sometimes I just got to yell. Yeah. Empathy. Empathy is one of the best tools to bring somebody from panic into their stretch. It might be a child, it might be a parent, it might be a colleague, it might be a spouse, it might be yourself. And empathy gets talked about a lot. And there's some, I think, misconceptions around it. Sometimes we talk about seeing the world through somebody's eyes. That's one of my favorite definitions of empathy. Less so walking in their shoes, but seeing the world through their eyes. And how I know I've arrived at real empathy is when they really make sense to me. They really make sense to me. Empathy does not require you agreeing with this person, that you like this person, that you like what they choose for themselves, how they're feeling, what they're doing. And empathy doesn't even require that you would do the same if you were in their shoes, if you were in their situation. So I have a forest here because so often the inclination is to pull somebody from, let's say, a part of the forest on the left here where there's less sunlight, pull them towards the sunlight. So often our jobs are in troubleshooting, are in fixing. And so that's a kind of fix. You're in a hard place. Let me bring you to an easier place. And that is useful. And that is very helpful. But what I find even more helpful is to make that step 2. Step 1 being empathy first, which means you go over to this darker part of the forest and you crouch down with them and you empathize with what it's like there. Yeah, it is stinky. Wow, it is cold here. It's so much colder than over there. Wow, if I were here, I would think life sucks too, right? So that moment you have rapport and influence. What you've gotten is a better chance at somebody being in their stretch zone. If you've ever been in a place of feeling alone in how you're feeling, right? All the responsibilities piling on you, it can feel very alone. If you're going through grief, or loss, that feels very alone. So empathy is very easy if a child comes to you and says, I'm proud of myself, I had a great day and I made art and here it is, right? Empathy in that moment simply is you're really proud of yourself, you had a great day and there's your art. Same child comes to you and says, I hate everyone because they hate me. I have no friends. Everyone thinks that I'm a loser. In that moment, empathy actually sounds like you think you're a loser because everyone's told you that. You don't like anyone because nobody likes you. That's empathy. Not, honey, you're amazing. Not, you're having a hard day. Tomorrow, I bet it's going to be different. We've all been there, right? Empathy actually is, I see your world. You make sense to me. I'm not going to talk you out of it. I'm coming to your part of the forest and I'm just going to stay here for a bit, right? In that moment, you have rapport. And so that lonely feeling that nobody knows what I'm feeling, I'm going to repeatedly say what I feel because you don't understand. We're giving that a chance to rest. Oh, you do get it. Okay. Now you've got rapport. Now you have influence. Now you can do step 2. Can I invite you to take a walk with me over to this part of the forest that's sunny? Can we go see what's up over there? There's your influence. And so empathy is really powerful for a parent, for a spouse, for anyone who deals with anyone else who feels things. And it's one thing to know where our zones is. It's another to know where somebody else's zones are. We know that in the panic zone, somebody's not listening. Why would I keep talking at them? At that moment, if not listening, right? It's kind of like somebody has those noise canceling headphones on. That's a panic zone. I wouldn't go up to that person and start talking at them. I'd find a way to say, could you take these off? Maybe I can help you take them off, right? And so that's one thing that empathy does. And that's one way of helping somebody take off those headphones. And that goes for children. And often we will talk about, red zone, green zone, yellow zone. Are they in their green zone? Are they listening? Before you tell a child why something is the way it is or why there's a rule and so forth. It can save a lot of energy when we don't try to engage somebody when they're in their panic zone to do something that requires them to be in their stretch zone. I just want to look at some of the chat comments. Thank you, Kelly, sharing, also crying, Sunita as well, laugh out loud or crying, absolutely. Lee shares taking the time to breathe and ground yourself. Beautiful. So this is all echoing, how do we stay grounded? And Dee Lovelace says, our homeless clients relax when I tell them that I was homeless at one time also. So sometimes it can help to relate. And Nicole says, makes me think of a video on empathy by Brene Brown. That's a great video, absolutely. And she, in that video, talks about the difference between sympathy and empathy, quite different. And here's the final tool I want to share with you from emotional intelligence that I find quite useful when right? Observation is, it is 3:35 right now. That's an observation. Evaluation is adding a judgment to something, adding a story to something, is assessing something. So an evaluation would be, oh my, it's late, right? So it's 3:35 versus it's very late. Observation would be, this coffee is, it's got things floating in it. Observation. Evaluation, this coffee is terrible. So observation and evaluation, why this is even a tool is that observation is enough to help somebody get out of panic zone. If you're explaining something, if you're setting a boundary with somebody, if you are giving bad news to somebody, often they will go to their panic zone. And in that moment, evaluative messages, evaluative comments will often send people deeper into their panic zone. And this is true for, again, loved ones, your kids, your parents, your spouses, as well as folks that you might meet through work. And so it's important to know what kind of statement you're making. And once you are able to discern, you can use observations and you can use evaluations consciously. Don't make evaluations when you actually mean to make an observation. Now, it's really hard because life and social norms actually make evaluations pretty standard. It's very normalized. So observation, can feel like I'm not saying anything. I have to say something, right? It's so normalized. Evaluative comments are so normalized that they come all the time out of our mouths. And so discerning between the two, it can be really powerful. It can avoid a lot of conflicts and can help somebody out of their panic zone. We've got something happening on chat. I lost sound for a while. I was frozen and I was back. Okay,
It
thank you.
wasn't too long. It was just when you began to talk about observation and evaluation, but it didn't
Okay,
last too long. So
all right. You let me know if you want me to rewind and say something that
I
I'm going to
think
guess.
we're okay.
Okay, cool. And Vicky asked a great question. Is there a way to help somebody out of their panic zone when they seem to be wallowing in it? When they really enjoy being in their panic zone or they don't want to get out? The answer is maybe not, especially when panic zone seems to be the norm for this person. And for some of us, the stretch zone can be very small. If we're talking about it in a trauma-informed way, this is one of the things that trauma does to someone, is that it makes the comfort zone smaller, the stretch zone smaller, and the panic zone big. So it's very easy to end up in the panic zone, right? You might be in the comfort zone one moment and something happens, and we usually call that a trigger. You're in the panic zone and it's hard to get out. Ways to maximize the chances of engaging with this person, right? Connecting with this person. I might say, firstly, to not have a goal of removing them from this, whatever we might be describing as wallowing. Instead, we empathize with their wallowing, right? So life sucks right now. Things are bad. Everything is horrible. I remember actually one of the most powerful moments in my life was when my grandmother, and I talk about this in the course on EI, was hospitalized, and she was terminally ill. And she was always known as a difficult woman who was contrary. She would always focus on what's not working and how she's a victim of her circumstances. And so everybody came to Hong Kong to see her in the hospital, all of her 8 children and all of her children's children. And she would say, well, I guess nobody loves me because only 7 of my 8 children came. And we're like, but 7 is a lot. And the other person can't get out of the country she's in because she could not get a visa. And she's like, well, yeah. And then we say, and all the cousins showed up. What do you think of that? All your grandkids are here. There's like 40 of us. And she's like, yeah, but they're not all here. And I said, well, that's most of them though. And she's like, yeah, but even though they're all in Hong Kong, they don't all come to the hospital at the same time. Everyone's all spread out. So she's very adamant on focusing on what's not working. So in a way, that's kind of a wallowing, although a very active way of wallowing in her circumstances. And what really changed was when I talked to her, when I did something that was not allowed in my family, which was to talk about her death, her imminent death. And I was reading a book at the time, Death and Dying, by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who I find one of my most important teachers. She has also passed since. And Elizabeth, in her book, says, you know, the dying know, they know they're dying. And if we don't talk about it, often is in the name of protecting them, but it really is protecting us from having to have that very awkward, difficult, powerful, and hurtful conversation. Very, very sad and heartbreaking. And so I try to talk to her about it. Say, are you afraid of dying? And I don't want you to die. We brace the subject that we were not allowed to brace. And from that moment on, her negativity and her wallowing actually changed. Her answers were, I don't want to die and I'm scared of dying. But something happened. And so sometimes the, you know, wallowing or feeling like a victim of circumstances, we can be freed from, not because we're convinced, we're pulled out of that deep part of the forest, you know, and say, look at the light, look at all that's going well for you. Come out here, right? Sometimes it's something else that's locked up, right? Something else that has not been seen. So it may not be so direct. Dee Lovelace says, many of my clients, their normal is panic. If I'm not stressing, something is wrong. I hear you. And Florence echoes that. So true for a lot of Indigenous domestic violence clients, people with anxiety. So again, this is trauma informed. We're seeing that people have this response. Why? Because they're resilient. They have had to survive. right? So in order to survive over and over and over, you got to be in your panic zone. The panic zone helps you survive. And so it can become entrenched, and it may be very difficult. And so the success there may be just recognizing panic zone. It may not be to get out of it, or it may be to take a breather outside and go back. So let's think about what observation might look like. My privates are itchy, but I don't want to talk about it. A child says this to a worker, let's say. Observation and evaluation. Of course, many of our flags go off when we hear something like this. Either I have to talk to this child about it, I have to take care of them, and I want to make sure I do it in a way so that's professional. You know, if you were the worker who's doing this kind of direct contact. I used to work in sexual health, so a lot of people also start thinking about, because when genitals are itchy, sometimes it's connected to infection, and infections sometimes are symptoms of sexual abuse. So all these flags might be going off. You might go into panic mode because you just want to make sure you're doing the right thing and everything gets done and you capture everything. And then you return to the stretch zone and you do an observation. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to know what to say. You don't even have to figure anything out yet. Some empathy and an observation. And what does it sound like? Your privates are itchy and you don't want to talk about it. Right? I've repeated it back to them. It's the best way to get somebody to continue talking. It says, I heard you. I'm not putting a judgment on it. I'm not saying, oh no, that's terrible. Or like, that's okay. Just so you know, that's totally okay. You know, privates are just body parts. You know, we don't judge them. I don't have to jump in there with my stuff. I say, okay, your privates are itchy and you don't want to talk about it. The same thing can happen if somebody you supervise comes into your office and says, I hate my job and I don't want to talk about it. Okay, you hate your job and you don't want to talk about it. You don't have to solve it yet, right? Step one is just empathy and observation. My child said to me last night, I don't want to be a boy. I'm actually really a girl. I think it's the internet, right? So a parent says this to a worker. And what does the worker say? Right? Again, so often the worker might be going through, oh, I got trained in trans things. And that's a kind of panic zone. Okay, your child said to you last night that they said, I don't want to be a boy. I'm actually really a girl. I think it's the internet. Then ask a question. Then what happened? Right? And then what happened? And let's do one more. You witnessed this. A staff member is drinking many cups of coffee and sighing a lot. Another staff member shares with you that the coffee drinking staff members, they're being nasty to clients, right? Again, many things might jump up at you. I got to take care of things. I have to, all the cascading responsibilities might come up. Step one, simply is observation. I notice you've had a number of coffees and you're sighing a lot. That's the observation. Another staff member has been talking about you can come later if you're going to talk directly to the staff member. In the meantime, the staff member who says to you, they're being nasty to other clients. Okay, they're being nasty to other clients. Tell me more. Right? So in whatever role you are, this is that little space we're trying to create between a stimulus and the reaction and the response. Kelly shares, my dad was a survivor of family abuse, but taught us that material things do not matter as long as everyone is healthy and alive. And that is what's most important. He told us often that while he did not have good parents, he had many other adults who invested in him and made him who he was. He was a great father, and he never talked much about this until he was ill. And thank you for sharing that, Kelly, and specifically to validate your role in supporting parents and children. Absolutely. How important it is to have trusting, stable, steady adults in children's lives and in parents' lives. So this is just a summary of everything we've talked about. Firstly, emotions are just messages. So if we can keep cultivating a good relationship with these messages, we can have an easier time with them. There are no positive or negative ones. To know your zone, to know where you are, and to find your way back to stretch. And it can very much help to know where the other person's zones are. To try to pause between a stimulus and a reaction. Empathy and observation is step one. If we can observe more and evaluate less, we might be in our stretch more and other people as well. And the key to everything here is to try to stay connected as much as we can and to return to this connection. Many of us may have been parented in a way where if something wrong happens, we get disconnected. We're punished. I don't love you anymore. You're bad. And what we know now is we got to stay connected. We got to say that behavior was not okay and I love you, right? Yes, and those things coexist. So we'll pause there. Thank you so much for having me and for sharing this space with me. I firstly want to thank you as a person, as a parent, and as somebody who lives in this province. Thank you for what you do. I really do appreciate it. And secondly, just as somebody else on virtual Zooming life, to remind you to take good care of yourselves. This is a lot of work. This is labor. So thank you. And thank you once again, Sydney, for inviting me.
You are so welcome, BK. I'm going to join you on camera for a bit before we say goodbye. And well, my mind is just twirling, but I feel very centered, and I feel like you just sort of brought me to this space of reflection, and really appreciate that. And obviously you can see some of the comments popping up in the chat. And before we let you go, we do have a giveaway. You had recommended some titles to me, and I'm going to share my screen just to show you. I chose two of the books that you suggested. Here we go. And I want everybody just to take a look at these two resources. And what we thought we would do is have another contest in the chat. So I'm going to call upon my prize maven, Sarah. Make sure you're there and ready to go. There she
ready
is.
To go.
She's our prize maven. And what we thought we would give away 4 books, and we would make the book your choice between these two, the winners. So what we would invite you to do is get your fingers ready and think about it for a moment of what is something that really stood out for you in this presentation in our time with BK. And the first 4 people to share their thoughts, reflections in the chat will get to choose one of these books. So please feel free to, the image of stretch. Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I think for me, that observation versus evaluation, that was a really sort of new and helpful insight for me today as well. So I just want to echo that. So I see there's lots of comments coming up. Just making sure, Sarah, that, I think you'll have found those first 4 people. So we'll connect with them after the session, and I'll find out what titles they choose. So I think. Oh, go
Can
ahead,
I quickly
Sarah.
just say the 4
Yes.
people, just so you know to keep an eye on your email. There's so much coming in, and every time I get a new message, it pops me down. So bear with me.
Absolutely. Let us know who the winners are.
Yeah, I have San said observation versus evaluation.
Right.
Krista said empathy. Sandy, less evaluation. And Marie said self-care. So I'll write down all your names, and then we'll be in contact with you.
Okay, excellent. And maybe send Sarah, if you are one of the winners, your full name and email might be helpful if you message Sarah.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of day one. And so again, I want to thank you, BK, for
Thank
joining us.
you.
It was a real pleasure and really appreciate your time.
Thank you for
And
having me. And I'm sorry, Sydney, I'm going to cut you off by
Mhm.
saying thank you and bye. I got to run, get my kid.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, it's been
Thank you,
great.
everyone.
Have a lovely evening, BK.
You too.
Okay,
Good luck,
we'll be
everyone.
in touch. So yeah, I think that brings us to the end, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And we will be gathering again tomorrow. Just like today, the doors will open at 12:30 tomorrow, and we'll have some fun and chit chat, and then we will start our program at 1 o'clock. We've got two sessions tomorrow. The first one on population health, kind of getting started with that, and then the second one on indigenous approaches to healing trauma. So look forward to you then, and have a good night. I guess I also want to say thank you to both Caitlin and Sarah for their help today. And we will look forward to seeing both of you again tomorrow. Have a good evening, everybody. Stay well.